Hey everybody, I'm Kris White with the American Battlefield Trust, and I'm standing high atop Camp Wildcat, which is a really cool spot here in Kentucky. It's the site of the first major battle here in Kentucky on October 21st, 1861. And if that date sounds familiar to you, that's the same day that Bluff is taking place out in the Eastern Theater, where it's not going very well for the federal forces under Charles Stone. It's just going to be a bad day there in the East, but in the West, things will be going a little bit better. But before we can get to October 21st, 1861 here at Camp Wildcat, we need to step back just for a moment to take a look at this map that we have here. This is one of the great interpretive signs that are up here on top of Camp Wildcat. What happens here in Kentucky in 1861 is crucial. Kentucky is known as a border state, and it wants to remain neutral throughout the war. That's not going to happen. It's strategically placed along the Ohio River, the grasslands of the Bluegrass State, which is going to be home to literally thousands of horses, which are going to be important to both the Union and Confederacy. You'll have rail lines running through here. You'll have manpower that's needed on both sides. So Kentucky really cannot stay neutral, though it leans much more towards the Union than it does towards the Confederacy. Well, even though Kentucky is neutral, both sides will at least at first play into Kentucky's neutrality. But Leonidas Polk, the fighting bishop of the Confederacy, he is going to go down into southwestern Kentucky and go to Columbus, and he's going to take a position here in the southwest portion of Kentucky to help block a potential Union movement down into Tennessee. This move is a boneheaded move because Polk is then going to force Kentucky's neutrality hand and push them right towards the Union. Shortly thereafter, a guy that no one's really heard of before named Ulysses S. Grant will move down towards Paducah, and now Kentucky is in play for the Union. What will end up happening is we're going to send a native son, a guy named William Bull Nelson, a big bull of a man, down into Kentucky to help take over part of the Kentucky troops at one point. We'll also have Robert Anderson, the hero of Fort Sumter, come down here, and the Union Army will establish what is known as Camp Dick Robinson, and that'll be about 50 miles north of where we're standing here at Wildcat Mountain. Now, because Kentucky's now into play, the Confederacy is going to decide they need to move back up into Kentucky with more troops. So you'll see the city of Bowling Green come under threat by Simon Bolivar Buckner of Munfordville, Kentucky. He is a native son of Kentucky. And then coming up from Tennessee will be a man named Felix Zollicoffer. And you've probably heard that name if you watched our Mill Springs video. You should go back and watch that with Stuart Sanders, who's literally the author of the Battle of Mill Springs, Kentucky. It's a great video that he's put together for us just a few days ago. But Zollicoffer, who is in charge of about 5,000 Confederate soldiers, is going to be tasked with coming through the Cumberland Gap, moving north along what's called the Old Wilderness Road, which actually runs off to my left, a portion of it. That was a road that was established in 1795 and led all the way down towards Watauga, which is going to be important during the Revolutionary War. If you know the Battle of Kings Mountain, many of the over mountain men who go over to fight at Kings Mountain on the side of the Patriots will come from basically the terminus of this Old Wilderness Road, which will run up through the Cumberland Gap, up through London, Kentucky, towards Bowling Green, and off towards the Ohio River. So this is a key interstate, as it were. As we drove up it, it's about one car length to get up here. And what will end up happening is the Union Army will decide they need to block this road from Zollicoffer's force moving north. They're going to turn this over to a young colonel named Theophilus Garrard. He is the son of one of the former governors of Kentucky, and he is given the 7th Kentucky Infantry Union. And these guys are supposed to come out and defend Kentucky in their home soil. Well, this is basically a regiment on paper. It doesn't really exist. It's going to finally be created at Camp Dick Robinson. And then once it's created there at Camp Dick Robinson, these guys will get 1 day of training and move their way down here towards Camp Wildcat, which will eventually, towards Wildcat, which will eventually turn into Camp Wildcat. Let's take a walk over this way to give you an idea of what the terrain looks like. So what he wants to do, Garrard, he wants to come down here. He wants to block the road that's just inside of those trees, block the Confederate approach. Union's coming from the north, Confederates coming up from the south, very appropriate. But he knows that he can't hold off against the numbers that the Confederates will potentially put against him, about 5,000 Confederates. He also knows that his men are having some problems. Illness will come across them as they come up into these mountains as the fall is starting to come across Kentucky. So the illness is going to play into it. So he's going to keep sending word back to Dick Robinson. We need help, Camp Dick Robinson, that we need help down here. Eventually, a Union force of about 7,000 will be put together here at Camp Wildcat, and these men will be arriving literally as the Confederates are as well. It's a race here along the Old Wilderness Road, about a 50-mile race for the Confederates to come north, about 45 miles coming down for the Union forces. As they arrive up here, a man named Alvin Schoff, however you want to pronounce his name.
Hold on, let's see. You can decide.
Who is from Poland. He's fought in the Austrian army, the Hungarian army. He's been exiled actually from parts of Europe. He's going to settle here in the United States. He has military training, and he is going to arrive in the area to steady the Union forces. And on the morning of October 21st, he will start to clash with Felix Zollicoffer's men. Zollicoffer does have background in the military. He is a newspaper editor who's kind of a hothead, and he's very nearsighted, but he does have Mexican-American War experience, and he'll actually be wearing a uniform from his Mexican-American War days out on the battlefield. Looks more like a Union general officer than he would a Confederate general officer. But Zollicoffer is going to arrive here about a day too late, unfortunately for him. And the battle, which will start to take place right around us, will involve some of the same exact units you would have seen at Mill Springs in a very similar fashion. The 15th Mississippi, the 20th Mississippi, the 20th Tennessee, the 17th Tennessee. These units will fight at Mill Springs. Marching down a road gets stacked up. Same thing happens here at Camp Wildcat just a few months prior. And we should talk just for a moment about the armament of these men. These are units, some of these units literally who don't know how to fire their weapons, especially on the Union side when they come off with one day of training down to Camp Wildcat. Others have a little bit more experience. The Confederates will be coming here largely with flintlock muskets, which are going to have short range, 80 to 100 yards. Some of the units will have rifled muskets, give them a little bit greater range. But that is what you're going to start to see up here, is this early war action of a hodgepodge of units who have some training, no training at all, others that are going to have a large amount of good armaments, some that have terrible armaments. And there will be a battle over Hoosier's Knob, which was just inside of those woods. You can see one of the cannon representing some of the Union Ohio battery positions. We'll have Kentuckians up here. We'll have men from Union loyal East Tennessee. We'll have men from Indiana, and we'll have, I think I already said, but Kentuckians as well. On the Confederate side, we'll see a lot from Tennessee, a lot from Mississippi, because these Tennesseans are worried, as is Zollicoffer, that these Federals can move right down the Wilderness Road through the Cumberland Gap into Union East Tennessee, because remember, East Tennessee is very Unionist, and Abraham Lincoln throughout much of the war is focused on the Knoxville area because he wants to keep these folks happy and keep that war support going on. But throughout the morning of October 21st, the Hoosiers of the 33rd Indiana, they will be clashing with Zollicoffer's men right behind us, one side coming up one side of the hill, one coming up another side. And it's a great sketch showing the Hoosiers coming up over the hill under John Coburn to meet with those Confederates. So it's really going to be a running action at first. Zollicoffer, who definitely doesn't have the position because he's moving up through this terrible terrain. This is a perfect defensive terrain, but it is a terrible terrain if you are an attacker. There's rocks out here. The road's narrow, still is today. Lots of trees, although it have been more open at the time of the battle. So as the battle goes on, there'll be a Confederate assault in the morning. There'll be a second Confederate assault in the afternoon. But Zollicoffer realizes that he's been bested. He's outnumbered. He's in a poor position. And Zollicoffer, the very aggressive Zollicoffer, will start to fall back towards Tennessee. The casualties for this battle will be relatively light for the action that you would see. You would probably have about 60 Confederates wounded, 15 or so killed. Numbers kind of vary. And then with the Union, you'll probably have about 40 to 45 about 24 casualties, about 4 killed, and about 18 wounded. But this is an early Union victory here in Kentucky, coming on the heels of Ball's Bluff, you never hear about it because Ball's Bluff dealt with a U.S. Senator, Baker, who is going to be killed in action, leading the 71st Pennsylvania into action at Ball's Bluff. Turns into a big to-do in Washington, creates the Committee on the Conduct of the War, congressional investigations, and just like, any good news cycle, you're going to follow the story, and that was the story at Ball's Bluff. Even though Camp Wildcat will help to secure Kentucky, at least for this moment, and it's a Union victory, it's completely overshadowed by the Battle of Ball's Bluff. But just, if you ever get a chance to come out here to Camp Wildcat, be sure to make sure that you have a good car, because this is the road you're coming up. It's a great wilderness road. Like I said, it's circa 1795. This would have been the main highway that would have taken you from Tennessee up into Kentucky and carried both armies here on October 21st, 1861. So I want to thank you for joining us today. Thank you to Gary Edelman behind the camera, and thank you to the Camp Wildcat Foundation, who helped take care of this land up here. It's a great friends group, and I know I messed their name up, but they really have some great interpretive signs up here, Canon, and some great interpretive brochures. So if you ever get a chance to come up to Camp Wildcat, be sure to do so. It's definitely not on the way to anywhere. But in 1861, it was on the road to Kentucky. So I want to thank you for joining us. I'm Kris White with the American Battlefield Trust. Thank you for watching, and thank you for supporting battlefield preservation.